Latinx voices. I'm so happy to be here. Let's get started with some questions, shall we? So the very first question, and this is to everyone, I'm going to call you guys in order. What does diversity mean to you? And why is diversity so important within your department? Sal, let's start with you.
I think that as storytellers, we need to have a broad view of the world. And I think that bringing different cultures to storytelling really helps the storytelling process. And I think that we each bring our experiences and our background to the stories that we tell and the stories we want to tell.
Wonderful. Leo, what do you have to say about diversity?
Diversity, just with going off with what Sal said, there's always a story out there for all of us to say. And to be able to have that platform to use to tell that story, it's great when we have the department, when we have a diversity in our department to be able to help us tell that story. You know, research could only go so far, so it's nice to get the people involved. You get more love into the project, into the story, into the character.
Yes, I love the love. And Millie, what do you have to say about diversity?
Hi, sorry, I was unmuting. I think it's not only relevant right now. I think we all sort of have to pitch in and help teach each other what diversity really means to us personally, to our crews. Sometimes that's just a word to fill in a gap, to check a box. And I think a lot of times the onus is on us to teach our crews a little bit about our own background, because we're all different. Everybody that came to the Americas, they're all from somewhere else. So we have to teach each other what we are. That's what I think diversity means.
Wonderful. And Ernesto, what's your take on diversity?
You mean diversity in our crews, in the workplace, or
within your department? And then what's your definition about diversity and how important it is to your workplace?
It is 100% essential in my workplace. And I wanted to, go back to my resume. I also did a few seasons of Star, which was a really, yeah, I did the last 2 seasons. So that was a pretty big diversity, show. But diversity in my crew within my department is 100% essential. It has been since the beginning of my career.
Wonderful. Love to hear that. And Dawn, what do you have to say about diversity and how important it is to you within your department?
Diversity is so important. And because I grew up, my mom's Puerto Rican and my dad European, right? But I looked up to Bob Marley because I said, he was African American and his dad was white. And so it's like, for me, it's like, well, where is my place in this world, And when I got hired on the show Insecure and I was welcomed, and getting to it felt like valuable that I can bring some real life experience to the table and feel a part of this team and like it's a family, So from my own personal experience, it's so important that we're one race, the human race, and to all be in this world together.
I love that answer. And Laura, what's your take on diversity?
Like a lot of people said, I think diversity really helps encourage empathy when relating with other people within our department, within the people we end up working with. And as we analyze and work on our scripts and stories and how to translate them, I think it only enriches what we can bring to the table and really kind of exponentially help our creativity as we navigate, this world and work with one another, because it's a people business.
Absolutely. I mean, we deal with people from all over, so it's important that we are always pushing and motivating diversity. It's the part of the reason why we're having these conversations and these panels. So as a Latinx person, this is for everyone, in costumes, how did you get where you are today? And tell us about your journey. We can start off with Sal. Tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are today and tell us about your journey.
I went to FITM to be a brand. I was going to be the Latin Calvin Klein.
Yes.
Fashion wasn't going to be my career choice. And I always sewed. And somebody one time, it was a costume designer, Julia Sclair, was in the store I was working in. And she was telling her assistant she needed another stitcher. And I'm like, I sew. and I started sewing on a film, and it was job to job to job. And I kept thinking, well, I'll do this until I have a fashion career. And 20 years later, I'm an Emmy-nominated costume designer and the president of the Costume Designers Guild. So
yes, wepa, we love that.
Costumes found me. I'm from a small town. My father was a mechanic. I lived in a farm town. So what did I know about fashion or film? And it wasn't until a recruiter from FITM came out to Fresno, where I was from, and they talked about the fashion industry. And then I found out about the film industry, and it opened my eyes to the possibilities that there's more, that there's a dream that I can have that I didn't know about.
That is awesome. Okay, Millie, what about you? Tell us a little bit about your journey.
Well, the very first time I saw An American in Paris, I was mesmerized. And I think I was maybe around 7 or 8 years old. And back then, I mean, we didn't have video, we didn't have, VCR. So you just had to wait for it to come back. And I was so young, I didn't remember the name of the movie. And I watched it, whenever it would come on, I would look for Gene Kelly on any TV show, because I didn't know the name of I knew Gene Kelly as a name, but I didn't know the French dancer. And so I was like, what is this movie? And those transitions of, going from one column, she has one look, and then, she goes in the middle, and then the second time you see her in the same scene, it was cut so beautifully. She's wearing purple. It was just amazing. And I think that for me solidified, whatever I do, I have to work in film. Wasn't quite tall enough to be a ballerina, but that's where it started. And then I went to Cal Berkeley. I studied costume design, and I minored in African American studies. So for me, it was the love of history, classics, and design and production. And then I worked for Paul Tazwell at Arena Stage Theater in DC. And then he insisted I go for my MFA in New York City. And I started my career really in New York City because of Paul. And I started in independent movies, and I loved it. And I was very lucky to worked on a show that I was very proud of called House of Buggin'. And this is important. I know I'm long-winded, so you can cut me off, Provi. But House of Buggin' was a very, very important show because in 1994, 95, it was the very first Hispanic national, on syndicated television, sketch comedy show starring Luis Guzman and John Leguizamo. And actually, Deirdre Govan worked on it with me. She was our super. So that's actually my start.
That's wonderful. And Ernesto, what about you?
For me, I grew up in Manhattan. I'm from Manhattan. I'm from New York City. And the only thing I ever wanted to do was be a costume designer. I remember when I was 5 or 6 years old, we used to have the $1 Million movie. I mean, I'm really old. So this is way before any of you. And I would tell my mother, I want to do that. And I would look at Myrna Loy and Powell. And she said, what do you want to do? I said, I want to make her clothes. I wanted to make Myrna Loy's clothes in The Thin Man. And that was my dream. And so I worked in retail in New York City. I worked at Halston. I worked all over Madison Avenue. And then I came to Los Angeles and fell into the industry. I worked with Richard Hornung. I worked with Bob Ringwood. And I worked on Coen Brothers movies. I worked on, I assisted a lot until I decided that I wanted to be a costume designer. And it came to me. I didn't go to it. Directors and producers approached me. And so I was very fortunate. And agents, I've always had an agent. So I've never really, it came to me, and I was very blessed. And I'm very grateful for that.
That's so wonderful. And Leo, tell us about your journey.
Mine is a little different. I've always wanted to be in the industry. I always enjoyed clothes, fashion when I was young. And I always enjoyed going to the movie theaters, and I loved to watch the stories and realize that the clothes had a part into the story to tell where the character came from, where they were going to. And actually, for a couple of years, I didn't follow that dream. I was following my dad's dream. But then thanks to my twin brother, that's also in the industry, gave me the pep talk that I needed to start following my dream and jump into the industry. And with his help, I got in and I'm loving it every moment. I love the fact that there's a lot of people that can't say what most of us say is we love what we do for a living every single day. Yeah, and I appreciate that.
That is so wonderful. And Laura, tell us about your journey.
I'm the third generation in my family to pursue a career in garments. When my grandmother came to the States from Puerto Rico, she worked in the sweatshops in the garment factory actually in New York, and that's how she supported my mom and her sisters. And then my aunt ended up being a fashion designer in the 80s. I went to FIT, and then I followed in her footsteps. I went to FIT as well in New York, the Fashion Institute of Technology. I interned on Broadway underneath designers, and while also volunteering on student film sets. And then when I officially moved to Los Angeles, I just kind of started working on small independent projects. And then I decided to take a couple of years PAing so that I can learn how the industry works on bigger productions and learn how to work with vendors and really kind of learn from, other people. And after a few years, I decided to go back to designing, and I've been designing now consistently since 2017, and I'm very grateful to be a member of the Costume Designers Guild, and it's been great, so thank you.
Wonderful. And Dawn, tell us about your journey.
Wow, I'm like absorbing everybody's. It's so cool to hear. I remember when I was born in Puerto Rico, I would be on the waterfront on the beach, and I would be dressing my Barbies up and like finding like the tops of like cans, right? Because I didn't have a rubber band. So I'd pull those off to braid their hair. And I would use that to like, decorate like either in their hair or on their like accessories on their clothes. And singing like the songs that we sing in Spanish, like the La Linda Manita que tiende bebé. And I would be singing to my Barbies, And so when we moved to Texas, and I grew up in this small little town of Corpus Christi, Selena was huge there. And I remember her outfits, and that I was like, this town is like, it's known for Selena. And it was exciting. I loved music. And so I moved to Los Angeles at a really young age, thinking it's just finding my way. But that was my gateway into I started as a fashion stylist assistant for a lady that had retired from the Oprah Winfrey show. So that was like my first set with her. And then from there, I landed my first costuming gig. And I was like, this is amazing. And I remember at the time we were dressing, a lot of different well-known names. And I said, I want to do costume though. I love the structure of the union. I love the department, So my first PA gig was on a J.J. Abrams show. And it was Undercovers. I think Laura Goldsmith was the designer. Leslie Herman, the Hermanator, was the supervisor. I love Leslie. She fired me, and then she hired me back whenever I was a costumer. So that was like a really cool moment. And we worked together until she just retired recently. And I love her for teaching me, the structure, like never leave your phone charger at home, like when you're on a production and all the things that we have to learn, and working together. And then I started, my first assistant design job was the X Factor. And that was just beautiful. And it just kept going. And I started designing some indies and then getting to work alongside Lou Eyrick, which she's like so amazing and so talented and creative. And the diversity on those sets are amazing. And so here I am, and now to be alongside everybody. And I do want to say one thing. I remember when Sal was voted in as the president, and it just warmed my heart. And I said, wow, like, to be part of this union. And it was nice to see diversity there as the presidential position there.
These stories are so wonderful. And it's just so amazing how everyone has kind of started from the bottom, then we're here, right? Everyone from different walks of life, from different ways. And with all that, interculturally, we're so diverse. And I kind of want to talk about that. How do you guys feel about projects that are based in Latino culture that might not be costume design or maybe crewed up by Latinos? And do you feel that Latinos are often overlooked? Let's go to Sal. Start with Sal. How do you feel?
I mean, I'm sort of torn on it because my career has been very diverse. I mean, I'm known for dressing Mindy Kaling on the Mindy Project, and she's an Indian woman. I've done the Pitch Perfect movies. It's about a cappella singers in the South. Those are worlds that I didn't live in, but I was able to tell the stories because I've created. I do know that obviously having, especially if you're doing a movie about the Latin culture, there's nuances that you can't necessarily learn. And there's just things that you knew because you grew up with it. But then again, you could also be of a certain culture and not having grown up in it. So there's pros and cons to all of it. And I think that it's always better. I mean, like when I worked, I ran the workrooms on Titanic for Deborah Scott in Mexico City. And the crews that were there had worked with many Americans or foreigners that had come in. I was the first one that spoke Spanish. Of all the people that came to work on workrooms, I was the first one they could actually communicate with. And I was able to, because I could communicate, when I went to the fabric store and I struck up a conversation with somebody at the local store, I found a shirt maker and I found beaters because I spoke the language. So I think in that sense of it, you always should have somebody who can benefit the project. But at the same time, I think that you should be able to design any project. I think Hannah Jacobs on the show Vida does an outstanding job. For a nice Jewish girl from the Valley, she dresses Latinas amazingly. So, I think there are good points and bad points to all of it.
Wonderful. I love that point of view. Does anyone else would like to answer this question? Millie, I knew you were itching. What do you have to say?
All right. So I raised my little hand button, by the way.
Okay. I acknowledged.
I feel a lot like Sal. Like, I think it's important. I also worked on an independent movie called Pocketful of Dreams, an Indian movie, and I shot it in New York City. I didn't know anything about saris. I agree. Research is very important. I have a background in doing a deep dive research. I think that's important. However, then there comes this like sort of push-pull because I am first generation Latina. My first language is Spanish. My mom was from Guatemala. My dad's Puerto Rican. And I feel like there are a lot of opportunities that we collectively Latinos in the Costume Designers Guild or, in the 829 or whatever union you're part of or non-union, could have that opinion. I think more so than maybe just what I'm saying. I'll just be very, very frank. I think it's important to consider a Latino, Latina, Latinx, however you want to call yourself, in a position of being the designer, more so than support staff like researcher or, continuity or first AD, because we do have an opinion based on our style. It doesn't mean that you cannot be Latino, but with the very few roles that we do have, I think it's important. I worked on a show, an indie in Mexico 2 years ago. I was so happy to be embraced by the Mexicanos that I worked with. And it called on me to I actually had to write everything in Spanish. My Excel things everything had to be in Spanish and it had to make sense. Communication is a big deal. So if you're working in Latin America, like Sal said, you have to be able to communicate. Provi, you too, I'm sure you want to share that story about, having to explain to your seamstresses. It's better. I experienced it too. I think sometimes it's important to be considered first. And then if we all are not if we don't fit the vision of the director or the story, then go to whoever is best. I think that's my opinion.
I'm in agreement with all this, and I love everyone's point of view. I love Sal's point of view and Millie's point of view on this. I think, yes, as a costume designer, supervisor, ACD, you can do anything. Everyone has the capability of researching, but there's a little, sazon that you're born with that you can't necessarily research, right? And I think that just goes across the board ethnically with other cultures too. There's just certain things and nuances that each culture does have that kind of resonates organically within your culture. And I can say for the Latin culture, that's very true. But yeah, I'd love to hear everyone's experience. And that leads me to my next question when we talk about language. So oftentimes, us being Spanish speakers or Spanglish speaking, whatever level of Spanish you're on, how does language when it comes to speaking Spanish at work, how does that affect work? Do you feel like maybe you were discriminated against at some point for using your language for whatever reason? And do you feel like you may have had to suppress yourself or your language, or you feel like you are excluding others from the conversation by speaking Spanish? Ernesto, what do you feel about language and speaking Spanish in the workplace, and what's your experience?
I speak Spanish in the workroom all the time, but not necessarily in a fitting with someone that doesn't speak Spanish. If everyone in the room speaks Spanish, then I will, I gravitate towards speaking in my native language. But if they don't, I won't do it. But I love to communicate. I usually almost 99% of the time have my fitters and my cutters and my seamstresses are Latina. I just gravitate. For me, they're like usually they get me. They get what I want. They get the nuances of the cut that I want. And so, I have some that I like to work with a lot. And so we speak in Spanish. And it's a lot of fun. But, I wouldn't do it with, with an actor in the room that doesn't speak Spanish. And just not wanting to be rude, that's all. But when I can speak Spanish with everyone, I do, and I love using our language in the workplace, because we don't do it enough, and there's none of us represented. But that being said, I also hire people that are not Latino. I work with a lot of Koreans, and I love hearing, when I have more than two in the room, like they're, going at it, and, the foods, and, so it's a lot of fun. I like diversity in the work. Like I said, I hire across the board, and it's fun. It's a lot of fun. So.
Wonderful. I love hearing that. Dawn, did you have something to say about language in the workplace, particularly Spanish?
Yes, I do. So, Spanish was my first language, and then I had to hurry up and learn how to speak English to start school here in America. And so I lost some of my Spanish, but understanding it, I still do. So I have been in a situation where somebody was speaking Spanish, not realizing, talking about me, and I understood what they said, and it wasn't very nice. So it was a little bit hurtful. So that's another thing too, and I think that also just, if somebody's going to do something like that, people can also feel vibes and energy and tones, but something just recently came up where there's a girl that I know that she's from Japan, and Japanese is her first language. And she's been trying so hard to get into the union and advance in her career. And I've seen her for 6 years since I've known her work so hard. And, but she speaks English, but it's her second language. And I decided in a recent experience, I said, I should really keep her number at the forefront, because I need to change. You know what I'm saying? I can change what I can do to try to do what I can do on my part to give her a chance, because her skill set is there. It's just getting, having a little extra time for the communication, but she has it, So I think that when we're able to have those opportunities and share that with somebody, how important that really is to highlight on that.
Yes, Leo.
For me, it's at least in the beginning of my career, it was kind of tricky, being the second generation in the States. My parents, we grew up with, in the beginning, we weren't, unless it's home, we were able to talk Spanish, but when we were out, in order not to get discriminated, like we were told not to talk Spanish as much and just try to speak English. And when I got into the industry, out of respect and out of fear, I didn't speak Spanish most of the time. I'd be very scared if somebody was around. But then it came to realization that why am I ashamed, or why am I scared to show and express where I come from, or where I'm from, or where my parents are from, to the point that now it's a balance of my parents taught me to be very polite. So I try to make sure, like, if I'm in a room with somebody that speaks Spanish and somebody that doesn't, if I have a dialogue, in the middle of that dialogue in Spanish, I'll translate it in English. So the person is coming along on the ride with it. So they don't feel left out. And it happens because I've been in fittings where the actor doesn't look like she speaks Spanish, but all of a sudden we start having conversation. Or even when I have a fitting with kids, being a male and the parents in the room, I've also used it to kind of diffuse that, to make them feel like they're home, they're safe. So there's a lot of pluses to be able for us to not be scared and be able to talk the language we love to use. It's a big benefit, and I think that people should understand that it comes with not just, trying to be rude. And it doesn't come with trying to be rude, but it comes with trying to express who we are.
I agree. I completely agree. And I hope that through this conversation that we are sending the message to say, yes, Spanish is something that is in us and that we will use, but it seems like everyone is kind of have a balance, right? We try our best to be inclusive, and it's about, always remaining professional, but at the same time, it's a benefit for us that we have. It's our little jewel, to the world, to share our language and to be able to relate to others who may only be able to communicate in Spanish. And Sal, you want to say something?
Well, I mean, it's, I started as a stitcher and worked my way up from stitcher to workroom supervisor, system designer. If you're in Los Angeles and you're going to the garment industry, 80% of them speak Spanish. So they would specifically send me downtown to go buy fabric or whatever. And a lot of the seamstresses, most of them are immigrants. So whether they're from Mexico or Armenia, as a workroom supervisor, I was able to communicate with the stitchers, and I was able to communicate with the vendors downtown. But then when I went to Mexico City on Titanic, I was the only crewman, because there was a whole English crew in the art department. And then those of us from Mexico City were prepping while everybody else is in LA. So I was the only person that spoke fluent English and what at the time I thought was fluent Spanish, because my parents didn't teach us Spanish. It was the adult language. So we were never taught Spanish. It was so that adults could speak to it, and we were never taught it. And they would take us to Mexico and throw us on the beach for the summer, and we'd come back thinking like, ¿Dónde está la paletería? And I could get a popsicle, but I couldn't order food, But anyway, so I went to Mexico City fully thinking that I was bilingual. And then I would speak to them in my Spanglish, which I got away with in LA. And in Mexico City, they were like, yeah, that's not the word. And then so after having 6 months in Mexico City with 50 tailors correcting my Spanish, my Spanish is fluent. But I was the go-between between the English crew and the Mexican crew for the entire studio, which was a huge responsibility. But after that experience, I came back much more fluent. And I think it's funny because we're living in this world where you constantly hear on social media, like, we're in America, speak English. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I speak Spanish and French. I speak 3 languages. I'm a little more intelligent than you are because I can handle that. And I think that the idea that we should hide the fact that we can speak several languages is ridiculous. I'm so proud that I haven't mastered French, but I can communicate. But the fact that I can communicate in 3 languages is pretty awesome. But yes, not in a fitting, not when you obviously, because even if you're just telling the seamstress, make sure you take those pants in 1/2 inch. And because that's the thing is that you're looking at the actor, and they don't know if you're talking about them or saying shorten the pants or look how big his butt is. So there's got to be an etiquette around speaking a foreign language.
I agree. It's definitely just one of our jewels. It's an asset. So I feel like also, and I'm going to get to you, Laura, as people are considering hiring Latinos and Latinas, they should understand that our asset is our language. And, whatever you feel about, the person feels about Spanish using it or whatever, it's a resource. So we hold a resource. It's like it's something that is on our resume, like Spanish speaking. So, we could be the communicators. And Laura, what would you like to say, Laura?
I also want to talk about the assumption that there should be a conversation about the assumption that if something is being discussed in another language, whether it's Spanish or something else, is that it's about you. Why is that the immediate knee-jerk reaction in that situation versus seeing that, some people have difficulty communicating and that we should be sensitive to that. We're in a professional workplace. And so why do you think that people are going to be talking chisme is something else? and not talking about like specifically, like I've been in those, like everybody here, I've been in those situations where I have worked with a tailor and being like, you know, communicating in Spanish has been much easier, or doing pickups and knowing that that vendor specifically only really speaks Spanish. And, you know, I'm there with my supervisor who does not speak Spanish really. And, you know, in this particular situation, she was very patient and understanding and knowing that, and because she can see what that, you know, what was happening. But I also think that it's, you know, on the other side that, you know, for people to say, oh, you talking about me just because you're saying something in Spanish is, I think, a little uncalled for in terms of like, why do you think that we're working, you know?
Well, I think that's right. And I think that's part of the education that we're giving our audience and our world, is that we want to say that collectively we do speak Spanish. We're not talking about you. You know, it's an asset that, you know, we can help and we can communicate. And I think we've all had experiences with, you know, people on our crew, or, you know, maybe even actors who just feel more comfortable and more at home in speaking Spanish. So that's definitely an asset we hold. And with that, I want to talk about some of the microaggressions that we have received, or that maybe you guys have received in your journey with costumes and being a costume professional and costume designer, directly related to being Latino specifically. Can you guys share some of your experiences? Let's start with Laura. You kind of, I think we're going into that. So let's talk about some of your experiences with maybe some of the microaggressions you've received of being a Latina.
So I'm what you consider white passing, in that on first glance, a lot of people tend to assume that I'm not Latina. And so I've been in situations where, you know, I have to reiterate what my story is, what my ethnicity is, in order to say, you know, like I have these experiences, or I'm speaking on these things because this is something that's intrinsic to who I am, to the culture that I grew up in, but sometimes it's dismissed because of the way that I look like. And that's incredibly frustrating, you know, especially when you're trying to, you know, talk to someone who's being stubborn on what their idea is, and they're trying to project it onto you, and you're like, but that's not the reality of this situation. I am who I am, and whether or not I look like what you think is very frustrating. I've been in a situation I like to think about too is people thinking that we're all the same no matter what, you know, like every single Latin American or Spanish culture, like country is the same. When I was peeing on a show, I was having like a Halloween themed bridal shower, and the designer of the show kept on saying, oh, well, I love Dia de los Muertos. And it's like, well, first of all, Halloween and Dia de los Muertos are two separate holidays. Secondly, I'm Puerto Rican, not Mexican. Those are two different cultures. You know, it's not all the same. Not all rice and beans are the same, you know, like, so I think it's really important that, you know, we understand just how beautiful and diverse even the Latinx diaspora is.
And speaking of that, I want to say that we have 21 different Latin American countries around the world, including a country in Africa, which I just actually found that out myself. My mom told me that like last week when I was going through some of this research. And with that, we have so many different intercultural things, intercultural isms that we have in our own community, from our colorism. So, you know, everyone can kind of look at the panel and see that there is a array of color between, you know, European to Afro-Latina, which, you know, there's even people who are darker complected than I am and Ernesto, but we kind of run the span from light to dark, you know, from Caribbean countries to Central American countries to European countries to South American, you know, and the United States, and, you know, the difference between a Latin American person or first generation, second generation. But with that, we do have a little elephant or a big elephant in the room, which is called colorism. And it's something that's been in our culture for a very long time. Unfortunately, the system of colorism that was kind of the past for maybe the African Americans is still pretty prevalent in our community. And it's something that we don't really talk about. It's something as children and even as adults that we were raised to kind of just deal with. We call each other by our colors, morenita, blanquita, whatever isms that we have, leche, whatever. Like, there's so many different, just little pet names, negrita, prieta. And, for a long time, even with myself being Afro-Latina, I kind of grew up like, prieta or morenita was kind of just like my name, like not Provi, not Providencia, it's Prieta, Morena, whatever. And for a long time, I didn't really take offense to it. And honestly, nobody that I know takes offense to those things, but unfortunately, some of the things that we do in our community is very color driven. And, it tends to put a prejudice in our community that is kind of an ugly thing that we never really talk about. But I think with the Black Lives Movement and things that are going on with our environment, and like we got kids in cages and all this stuff that's happening in our community as well, we need to recognize that that's something that, it can be a benefit, and it's also a disadvantage in our community. And I think that now we're starting the conversation about colorism and how prominent it is in our community. So with that said, how has that affected you in your workplace? Do you find that it is a benefit to you, or has it been something? Have you seen someone of another ethnicity maybe being discriminated against? And then, like Laura said, people don't know she's Puerto Rican, and maybe someone has said something and she's like, whoa, maybe someone else tell me about their experience, Dawn, and then we'll go to Salvador.
Well, I definitely, I'll just, a little preamble is even growing up, being born in Puerto Rico, only speaking Spanish, then moving to South Texas, where it's very close to Mexico. And my mom would tell me, you need to mark Latin on your paperwork. And I came home crying one day. And I said, they all made fun of me. All the girls said, I'm a fake chola, a wannabe. And I was like, and so she goes, you tell them you're Puerto Rican, and what are Puerto Ricans supposed to look like? There's all different Puerto Ricans when you get on the island, and they just don't know that yet, but you do. So you have value, so that was something I had to work really, really hard at, is understanding my place in the world. But recently, Mildred and I worked on a job together, and we went out to Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I was in the production office, and they said, she's a feisty Latina. And I said, yeah, I'm a Puerto Rican too, and I'm in this, and they just looked at me like, whoa, like, oh my gosh, So, that's just my own personal experience, even just recently on that topic.
And tell me about your experience, and we'll go to you next, Miller.
I've always thought that I was the most Latino looking person ever, but 80% of the time, even Latinos think that I'm Asian. Growing up in high school, I thought I was one of the Japanese kids, and I look in the mirror and I'm like, I don't get it. But when I speak Spanish, they're surprised. But as far as colorism, I think that as Latinos, we see it more than anything when you watch like Latin television shows, because the stars are always the lightest Latinos on. And look at the actress from Roma, who was amazing. And the light-skinned actors in Mexico sort of pushed her away because she was dark and Indian looking. So I think that Americans think that racism was really only in America with it's black and white. But even within the Latino community, I don't think it affects us much in the film industry because there's not that sort of hierarchy. But we definitely see it in the Latino entertainment industry, where the light-skinned stars are they're the ones that are the golden kids.
Absolutely. It's something that, I hope that we as a community and being in the film industry, and I think that maybe seeing our diversity in the costume department and different departments will show, maybe showrunners and producers like, oh, well, if we could do it in our departments, maybe we could start casting people. I don't know. I feel like, even though it may not be progressive, I'm hoping that these kind of conversations and seeing people finally seeing kind of diversity in every spectrum when it comes to Latinx, that that will certainly change. Millie.
All right, I'm going to be quick because I want to hear what Ernesto has to say about this.
Me too.
Everybody else wants to hear too. But I will say on a very broad scope that, number one, I grew up in a house where we talk like this. We were like, mira, ¿dónde está Mildred? Mildred vine. We scream. So I grew up in a house that we scream. It may not just be Latinos, but particularly my house in Puerto Rico, where I grew up every summer, we scream. I talk loud. So all of a sudden, I am the truth of the manipulated truth of someone else's experience upon me has always been she's aggressive. Now I have to say, I started my career in New York, so none of this shit ever happened. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that four-letter word, so you can cut that out. But this stuff didn't happen in New York because it's super, super diverse. Whether or not you like it, in New York, if you're from Madison Avenue or if you live in do or die Bed-Stuy, everybody takes the subway to go to work. So you have to live with a lot of people, whether or not you like it. And so I feel like here in LA, it's been very difficult because everyone wants to say that I'm aggressive, when it really is just me being direct and clear. And it is not passive aggressive. It's actually just being very clear, and I'm loud. So what am I supposed to do? Take down my tone to help you change? Well, I'm doing my work and working on myself and changing, but it's also incumbent on everyone else in a production to do their work and understand who we are and have patience and, you know what, open your heart to however someone else is talking. Ernesto?
So being from New York City, I get what I have good hair, like that's like when you
Pero bueno is what we call it. Go ahead.
To my mind is like, that was the kind of shade they would throw, and when you're from New York, I got good hair, like I pass. But people hire me. You can't help, when I go for an interview, I don't look at colorism because I can't hide it. Like, I am the color I am. I am the person I am. So when I go for an interview, I go against, I don't know who else they're interviewing, but when I get the job, it hasn't been because I was brown or because I wasn't white. They hired me because of my credentials, because they thought I could do the job. So I really haven't experienced a lot of, I don't really know when you say that, I don't know what that really means. I haven't felt those prejudices. I really haven't. And I'm, kind of grateful I haven't had to really address that. I have had to address it within my own community though. And it's ironic that the prejudice came within my own Latino community. And I'll leave it there.
Leo, what do you have to say?
Being I'm born and raised in LA, and the community, I think I'm with Ernesto. I haven't really suffered it too much, but I have within my own department at times where people forget that I'm Latino, because I don't fit the stereotype of first generation Latinos or dress that certain way, or even my mannerism or how I try to live, that I hear a lot, even within my own department, which is it's sad to the point because a lot of times, I'm one of the head of the departments and it's usually the people below me. And I've had to be the better person and, instead of getting upset or getting offended, try to teach them of the proper way of being a dad, trying to teach the kids, a better way to live. But to say that it's affected me in a bad way when it comes to getting hired for things, no, I haven't felt that. I haven't felt that, but I have, like Ernesto, I felt it in my own community. I wasn't Latino enough. Yeah. Which is hard. It's hard. It's hard because you want your family, your community, your people to be proud of you. I come from the inner city, and I have kids and I've done well to give them a better life. So, I've done the struggle of getting out of the inner city and all that, and just wish I would get more of a pat on the back from my community for all the hard work, because that's all they want for us. As when we're kids, they want better for us. And then when we get there, they're like, oh, you forgot where you came from. Like, no, I didn't. I remember every day where I came from. Yeah, it's a hard pill to swallow when it comes to stuff like that.
Yes, I agree. It's a hard pill to swallow. I can speak from the Afro-Latina experience. It even took me a while to even embrace Afro-Latina. Okay. Some people, when I say Afro-Latina, they don't know what I'm talking about. In my own community outside, they're like, Afro-Latina, what is that? We're all Latinos, right? Like, what are you talking about, Afro-Latino? Why are you saying, are you separate from us? And it's only to say because the African and indigenous part of my culture has been suppressed and has been looked down on and has been shown in a negative light, that being Afro-Latina is embracing and putting to the forefront and celebrating the African diaspora, which all of us are a part of in the in the Latino community, Latinx community. So I have, growing up Latina, you just hear so many different crazy things. Like, I have pelo buena, as Ernesto talked about, and you thinking you have to get blow dried like every week to keep that up, and just don't go in the sun, or make sure you marry white. Not that wasn't ever told to me, because my mom is also Afro-Latina, and she was very proud, and she's actually mulata, so she's like what we call mulata, which is like black and white. Her dad is indigenous African, and her mom is from Spain. So she had a lot of colorism issues growing up back then in Puerto Rico, and she really embraced her African side because that was demonized. So, as an Afro-Latina, I'm, very proud to always say that, yes, I am Latina, but I am a Black woman first. When you look at me, and I embrace that part of my culture, and it's something that I'm very proud of, and I'm okay to wear my hair curly. I don't have to straighten my hair every week to be Latina enough. I am enough, and as Salvador was talking about, he spoke Spanglish. I grew up in Germany, and I spoke perfect English and had no accent. And I came to the United States with wooden clogs, and I was a German girl. You could not tell me. And my last name is German. I'm a quarter German on my dad's side somewhere. And I didn't know any better, and I was told like, oh, you don't speak Spanish enough. You're not Latina enough, you must be German, or you must be, something else. And then, I was told that I wasn't this enough. And you're always told, as a Latina, sometimes you're like in the middle, right? Like, do you fit over here? Do you fit over there? Sometimes. So it's like being a Latina is not a race. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. Like, that's not a race. Like, it's a melting pot of so many different things. We look so different. We, I think it was Laura Dawn said, like, the rice doesn't taste the same. The beans are different, right? And so it's all about educating, like, everybody's not Mexican and everybody's not Puerto Rican. When you think about the West Coast, you think of more of the Mexicans. And then when you think on the East Coast, everything seems to be Puerto Rican, but there's so many different in-betweens, right? It's like just not about those two cultures, but it's all about just educating and embracing, and also understanding that we embrace, aside from the European Spaniard colonization that every country has gotten, which is part of us too. I would love to see as a community that we also embrace our indigenous side, and we're also embracing our African side, and all of those things are beautiful. Being from my abuela being from Spain, and my abuelo being Taino, I'm proud of all of those things. That's what makes me, and I'm very proud of that. And so it's just about education, and I see that our community is starting to recognize that and just embrace that even more. And I love that, Ernesto and Leo, they never experienced the discrimination. I definitely have. Millie has, and that's okay. Everyone has their journey. But for me, I think that being Latina also just like made me stronger, because I'm not limited to just one thing, right? I can even if there's discrimination and stuff, I mean, that's like, it's like a duck, like I'm a duck. So it just kind of rolls off my back, right? Because at the end of the day, I'm American, I'm Latin American, and I'm a citizen, and I'm just like you. So I can go for any job, from Dolly Parton to Oprah Winfrey to Black Lightning, and I've gotten them all because I believe in who I am, and I know that being diverse has only made me stronger and has made me an asset in anything that I step into. So that's, kind of what I want to say. But anyway, let's go to our next question. Millie, you want to say something? Unmute yourself.
Real quick, I need to give this story. So here's a very short version of it. I was shopping on Fifth Avenue. I was picking up stuff from the Gucci store, or actually not the store, the Gucci PR office. I had 6 garment bags, and I was somewhere in my late 20s, early 30s, and I'm walking around in tacones, looking all cute because, and I will say this is very important for anyone that's listening to this, is that sometimes because of my color, it doesn't look like I can afford to go to a Gucci. Maybe I personally couldn't, but I was on a show. So I had 6 huge garment bags. I literally saw a cab. It happened to be my birthday in December, and it was the first fall of snow. I see a cab. I was like, oh my God, miracle, because you never see cabs at 5, 6 o'clock. So I'm waving down the cab. The guy sees me. I'm looking pretty dolled up, all funky. And I have all those garment bags in my arms, and I have to get this cab. How else am I going to get the stuff to the studio? So I was waiting for this. The cab was coming, and then these 2 white women come out of, they came out of either Tiffany or what's underneath that? I think it was Tiffany. It was on the corner of 5th Avenue and 57th. It's 2 or 3 stores in. I don't remember. So these 2 white ladies come out, and then they didn't see me, but I was only 600 feet away from them, and they wave the cab, and the cab pulls over to them. And I was like, I can't have this happen because I'm screwed. What am I going to do? So I was like, excuse me. And I went on the other side where you're not supposed to go, not on the curb side, but on the driving side. Cause it's a one-way street, 5th Avenue, if you don't know this. So I'm getting in the cab, and I go, I'm sorry, I was waiting for this cab from a block away. And the one woman, she slams the door and she goes, I've never, you fucking spick. And she says that to me as I'm getting into a cab. And she slams the door on my foot. And I bawled because it never occurred to me that I would look like that to someone else. And it didn't matter whether or not I was dressed up. They saw this. So maybe some other people don't experience this. I'm sorry I F-bombed. I'm sorry that I, 4-letter worded it. But there was no other way to express that, because to this day, that still hurts. And sometimes I can't escape what I look like, no matter how great my resume is. And it's painful.
I love that. I love that you shared that with us, Mildred. Thank you so much. I would like to open the floor to the audience members and see if anyone has any questions for our panelists, or if our panelists has any last and final remarks. Yes, Dawn.
I want to give so much. What you just said brought tears to my eyes, and I felt it all. And I too, it got to a point in my life as well, and being in this business and meeting beautiful people like yourself and every single person on this panel. And we are filled with so many beautiful people, in our union, but I wouldn't change it any other way. I'm grateful that I do too feel like it's been an asset being able to be born somewhere else and to have so many different things that I've gotten to a place where I do love myself. And I say thank you, to being able to have this bigger imagination, and to think outside of a box and to work together and to have a huge heart and love and compassion for one another, and to understand, that people might look at me and they just might think, oh, she's just a white girl, but inside my internal journey that I've gone through, I just thank you so much for sharing that with us today. It was so beautiful and such a great reminder.
I also want to say that there's so much trauma that has happened to a lot of us that we hold. So much trauma going on in the world, seeing people dying for no reason, people locked in cages, our political climate. We're going through a lot in our own community as Latin Americans, as people of color, as people of ethnicity. And, you know, sometimes we just need to share, and we just need someone to hear and to understand. And I hope that through this panel and through this conversation, we're able to educate others on our community. And Tal, what would you like to say then, Laura?
I think that part of our responsibilities as the diverse members of the 892 is that we need to be ambassadors to the world. I didn't know about the film industry because, I mean, that wasn't in my, I knew I loved films and I remember watching Flashdance and think that was amazing, but I didn't have anybody to talk to about it. I'm in my third term as president of the Costume Designers Guild. I'm probably one of the only Latino presidents of the unions in the industry. And my first week that I was sworn in, I had to go to the office and sign the checks because as a president, you sign checks, and I had to go in and sign a bunch of paperwork. And Rachel Stan, our executive director, said, "Well, hurry up because I've got a class of students coming through from Fresno State, and I'm going to give them talk about the Costume Designers Guild." I'm like, "Really, from Fresno State? I'm from Fresno." She's like, "Do you want to stay and talk to them?" I'm like, "I'd love to." Because, you know, I'm from Reedley, California, a small town out of Fresno. And in walked in 30 Latina and Asian girls, and they're sitting there on their phones, and Rachel's giving her speech about Costume Designers Guild. And then I'm like, "Hi, everybody, I'm Salvador Perez. I'm the president of the Costume Designers Guild. I designed Mindy Project and Pitch Perfect, and I'm from Fresno, California." And their eyes perked up. And all of a sudden I had their attention because I think that it was such a foreign thing to them. But then to hear like, wait, that guy's from where I'm from. And I think that and part of what the Costume Designers Guild is doing with 705 is doing an outreach program to go to high schools. And we used to always go to colleges, but by the time you're in college, you've made a career choice. We want to go out to the high schools and get these kids when they don't know what they want to do, but they have creativity, and say, there's a whole career here. You don't have to, you know, my father was like, you know, all of my brothers learned to fix cars. I didn't. And as a diva at 12, when one of his friends said, "Do you want to be a mechanic when you grow up?" And I said, "Oh, God, no, I don't get my hands dirty." And I remember the look on my father's face. It was like, "What do you mean my hands dirty?" But my point was that I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do something else. And I think that we need to tell our story like this to younger kids so that they know there's a whole other possibility out there, and they can create a world and have a career that they never thought of. I mean, like I said, I fell into film, but I'm still doing clothes, and I get to do big fashion-y shows, and I've done a fashion line through Mindy, and I'm getting to live my dream. But I didn't know this was possible. I'm from a small town. I didn't know this was possible. So I think that I want us all to take the responsibility of the blessing that we have to have these amazing careers, to share it and let other kids know you can have an amazing life. You can be creative, and you can earn a great living doing it.
Absolutely. Ernesto.
I agree. You know, I think it's really important for me. I've been in this industry for a while, and you have to practice what you preach. You know, like I have taken a lot of people of color, Latinos, Black, Asian. I have taken them under my wing, and I have made superstars. You know, costumers, supervisors over the years, and I am really proud of that I have been able to pass on what was given to me, you know, what I've learned, and pass it on to other people in my ethnicity and not in my ethnicity, you know, like African American. I'm not African American, but I have taken a lot of African American people that are come from the inner city that would never have even known what it is to be a costumer. They would never have known what it was to do a continuity book. They would, none of it. And I've been very happy to have brought people into the unions and into the guilds and and those are the things that are important as when you reach our level as costume designer, to pass it on to other people of diversity, or Latino, Asian, African American, the lesser recognized.
Absolutely.
People.
Absolutely. Amelia.
I mean, I don't just think Latino. I think Black people. I think Korean. I think anybody other than the white people that have been here all along. Not that I have anything against white people. I owe them everything. But it's about time we spread it around.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ernesto. And Millie, you wanted to say something?
I think just a second. I think Dawn has to go.
Oh, Dawn, do you have to go? Okay. Dawn?
I do. And yes, thank y'all so much. Thanks. I just have so much love for you guys. I'm leaving this feeling so much more inspired, empowered as a woman, just as a human, and also, so proud to be part of this guild and to do this craft and this work that we do. Thank you guys, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. Millie.
I wanted to ask you, Provi, because we're so privileged to have you in this guild. And when I met you a couple of years ago, we were trying to get this diversity committee together, and you were just so real and honest. And I don't know if you want to share, what is it that how do you experience your beginning? And if anyone doesn't know, she was she was our featured costume designer in what was it, the LA Times August section of Hollywood Isn't Diverse Enough. And out of all of our unions, yeah, I agree with Sal. I'm grateful that we are multicultural in our guild, more so than any others. I know people in set designers and ADs, but I wanted to ask you about I'm just honored to have you ask us questions. So back at you.
Thank you. So I want to say that I love my union. I want to say that when I was sworn in, I was so elated that Salvador was our president. And I thought, wow, you have a Latin president, and that's so great. And I want to say, as a costume designer, I'm working on currently, and this is my first season was last season, season 3 for Black Lightning, which is about an African-American superhero family, which was so exciting for me. I was very intentional about hiring a lot of Latinx costumers and keys and African-American and Asian. But it just so happened that I was hiring people, and I started to oh, this person's from the Dominican Republic. Oh, this person is Panamanian. Oh, my key is from Cuba. My ACD is from Mexico City. And then I was like, do I have the first Latinx crew in the East Coast? This is amazing. And so I am so proud to be part of that change. And I think that working in this industry, and even with the LA Times article that I did about diversity, I could be proud to say that our guild is a representation of that. And when this diversity committee was happening, it was so exciting for me, because I felt like, our guild was making it a priority to say that diversity is important to, being hired and being a costume designer. And I was so very proud to express that in my article, where it was talking about there was a lack of diversity. Yes, absolutely. But being part of this committee and this guild has definitely shined light on that. But, as a Latino working in productions, you have your challenges. But I think that, every challenge makes me stronger. I want to say, being Afro-Latina has been beneficial for me, because I can work on Black projects, I can work on white projects, I can work on Spanish projects. And, there's people, there's mainly, it is mainly European, it's mainly white. And, I've learned to not let that be my block, not let that be the reason why I didn't or did not get a job. Because for me, anybody of any other race has nothing to do with what Providencia is bringing to the table, because Providencia is bringing sazon. Providencia is bringing alcapurria. I bring that spice and I bring that flavor and I bring my experience to the table. And that's what I want to say. So yeah, my experience has been, coming from being a stylist and working with celebrities and working with Sarah Blakely from Spanx and having a diverse clientele. And then, having a costume designer come down and say, we can't pull in Atlanta because guess what? the only thing that's happening is Tyler Perry, and they don't understand what studio pool is, and we need somebody, and, you know, finding me a friend through a friend. And my first job was an ACD. I didn't know that you start off as a PA, then you come in, and then you know, there's a hierarchy, and then you become a designer. I was blessed to kind of do the fast track, and then to like really like be like, okay, let me open my mind to what's costume design and research, and have Ruth Carter as a mentor of mine, and have Danielle Hollowell as a mentor of mine, and Rashida, and all of these people to take me under their wing. And I absorbed everything. I didn't come in acting like I knew everything. I came in humble and like wanting to learn it all. And then, you know, just fast tracked and did my due diligence, and didn't let anything get in my way. So Lara, you have something to say, and then we'll go to Sal. Oh, we have some comments in the chat. Go ahead, Sal. Did you want to say something?
I'm watching these things, and I'm like, they're disappointed that we're not talking about making it producers hire us as lead designers. Excuse me. I think us existing, they are hiring us as lead designers.
Hello.
Kind of like, well, we're all. I mean, I've never stopped. I mean, all of us. It's not the 30-year career. All of us are working, so they are hiring them. Obviously, we need to get more of us out there. We just did a study of diversity in our union, and although you see a panel of us here, there aren't a lot of us in the union. We need to, although we are diverse. Our board is diverse. We have Latinos and African American. I'm a Latino president. I'm a gay man. My former president was an Asian woman. We are probably one of the most diverse organizations in IATSE. Obviously, it's a start, but and we're an open organization. Anybody can join us with a job offer and experience. So, we embrace that diversity. I don't think that you get more bees with honey than with salt. You can't force a production company to hire us. But as an organization, we can highlight these people, because bottom line, producers hire who they know. And that's great. I have worked for the same producers. The first director that ever hired me, George Tillman on Soul Food 20 years ago, still hires me. So I think that it's about, as an organization, we're not going to insist they hire us, but we're going to say, hey, look at these 10 amazingly talented people that you don't know. That's what an organization should do, is highlight and showcase our members so that they can get jobs. But I'm never going to insist to anybody that you hire based on diversity, because that's not going to help us. I think showing how talented we are is what helps us.
Yes, Laura, and what would you like to say? And then Ernesto, great answer.
I think that also regarding allyship from people who are non-Latinx in our community, and which is why we're doing conversations like this to talk about our experiences, is to make people aware of the responsibilities we carry in regards to the conversation of representation, and to not feel the pressure of representation is a privilege, that is not something that burdens you on an intimate level when you work within this industry, knowing that when you come onto a project, you're one of very few numbers that are represented. And so it's really important that our non-Latinx, or people who don't necessarily come from a marginalized community, can really be an ally, and that they're open to what we have to say, and that to think of us, that are qualified, that are professional, that know how to communicate, that can do our job, that we are skilled. I think that doing that and making other people aware of our obstacles and struggles as we navigate this industry is really important, which is why we have these conversations, and why we're taking the moment to focus on everybody's different experiences within a marginalized group. And I think it's really important, because there's a lot of people who don't even understand, the same way that Provi said that people didn't know what Afro-Latinx meant, or people don't even know what this new term Latinx is. And so I think it's really important that we highlight those things as we move forward in increasing diversity and just making it normal. So we're not having a conversation of diversity, we're just creating a new normal.
Amen to that. And Ernesto, and then Leo.
I hate to say this, and but I sort of have a quota system when I hire. I really do. I like to have people of every race and color in my department. It is a must. I do not I've gone into shows that are an African American show or a white show, and everyone is one color in the department, And I just can't work like that. And I think that as department heads, we need to, it has to come from within. In other words, we need to change that narrative. You know, like you have a lot of European designers and you go on their crews and you look at the call sheet and you look at the crew list and everyone is European. And I think that's not right. You know, I think that there's enough of us now in 705 and 892. I mean, 892, you know, we are a hire at the discretion of directors and producers. That's how I get my work. You know, that has but as a department head, who I hire and how I represent the department is my business.
Yes.
And I think that that's where we need to stand strong.
Yes. And Leo, what do you have to say, especially from a supervisor?
Kind of the same thing with what Ernesto was saying, as you know, what everybody's saying. The fact that Sal said, you know, we are the ambassadors that push us our cultural ahead. Same with Ernesto. We are the head of the department to the point that we hire the people we want. And for me, I always try to hire, as somebody said, ageism. I try to hire the spectrum from young, old, black, white, Asian, just because it's the type of world I want to live in. So since we're up there, it is the type of world that we can create at work, which is the reason why we're doing all this, is to try to not only share the people that in our culture or our people and share their talent, but also like Mildred, not let people go on living without knowing the struggles we've gone through. Like you need both. Like you can't just say, yes, I'm going to help you, but not understand what we've gone through. Like that's the reason why we're doing all this, is it's one big lesson, the good and the bad, so people don't forget, same way as Laura was saying, and we just have to put a spotlight on all the struggles we've been through. So this is what the diversity part of is in this conversation, was all that, was the fact that we want people to understand our pain. Like I know people know that there's, you know, racism or the struggles that we go through, but they don't know the specific day-by-day thing that we actually have to live through. And until you understand that, like Mildred's story, like you can hear that people have gone through racial situations, but that, hearing the specific details of it, like it makes you, it puts you in that situation and you learn from it, you feel from it, which hopefully the more we do that, the more we share our stories, the more we will break through whatever barriers and walls people have, not to realize that this is real. We're all human beings and we're all struggling just to be loved.
Wonderful. I love this. And Laura, what do you have to say?
And I wanted to just jump off what Leo was saying about ageism. I think that it's two-way, right? But I think that you should be honored to work with people who have more experience than you in this industry, because they have been here when the industry was so much harder to navigate, when now look at the conversations we're able to have. And so I think being open to what they have to say regarding their stories is really important. And on the other side, I think it's also to be really aware of the new generation of costumers and designers that are entering our world and what they have to say. The world is constantly changing, and the freshness, and also how, you know, people, you know, how what they have to say is coming in, and how that can influence how we work with one another, and also how it affects our design, because we're constantly thinking about the characters we create. And so understanding those different viewpoints between generations is also really important, especially in immigrant communities, where somebody who came up in the mid of the 20th century or even later, and then compared to now, it's going to be a very different story to tell, and their designs are going to be different as a reflection of that experience.
Great. And I think Millie has something to say.
I'm still here.
I mean,
that happened in circa 2000, and I'm standing here, y'all. So I mean, that's it. Like those were some bumps in the road, and it made me acutely aware of what colorism is and what racism is, because I never really quite figured that out. I never really thought that it was a thing, but it is a thing. And it was very apparent to me, but it doesn't mean I'm gonna stop, and I'm resilient. One thing that everyone should know is that, at least from my opinion, Latinos are resilient. I come from Mayan descent, Taino descent, and we're still here. We didn't all get offed off. So, you know, we have to just continue to try to help each other work through some of the pains. But also, I do think that it's important for me to share these stories, because it isn't going to be easy. Whoever's coming up, whoever's watching this, who's ever not in the guild, or whoever wants to be in the guild, or whatever, if you want to be a supervisor, I love supervising. I've been embraced by, you know, one of my mentors was Mona May, and she's a white costume designer. And I got to tell you, she taught me a lot. And, you know, she's a white woman. So it's not about like thinking that you can't work with other people. I'm still here. And yeah. I'm still, you know, I did an expose on Sal when I got back into the guild. And I was very proud to learn about his story when I was a journalist writing for a particular magazine that I care not to mention anymore. But I do appreciate the fact that Sal had such a very, to me, very touching story. And I think all of us here have to, not have to, but I just want to say I'm still here. I think we're trying to do our best. Maybe we're not perfect. I'm not perfect. I know I have a lot to learn, but we're doing our best to try to help everyone either become a costume designer, costume supervisor, ACD. I've also, worked on some great projects as of recent with Francine Tanchuk as her ACD on One Night in Miami. I'm extremely proud of that. I'm extremely proud of a lot of the work that I've done, whether or not it's diverse, whether or not I've been able to call the shots, but I'm not here because I just decided one day I was going to be here. I've been pulled together by a lot of people. And I think we all have to sort of, anyone that wants to be a naysayer, like this was useless or, we're not talking about relevant topics. Well, it's not going to be relevant for every single person. Hopefully this is a lesson for everyone. Maybe you are the person that this is relevant for. Maybe you don't see it yet.
I love it. I think everyone can learn from our experiences, from our diverse intercultural experiences, from our trauma, from our wins, from our losses. And I think it just, really shows how diverse we are as Latinos and Latinx people and department heads, and what to expect when we want to hire you or what to expect when you want to be, one of us in our positions, and we are the example. As Salvador said, we are the ambassadors. So, it's important to understand who we are as a people. So Ernesto, and then we'll close.
I have to give kudos to technology. During this whole conversation, I have been doing fittings on my phone for a movie with some major people. Nice. And I've been doing fittings right now. And I have a 1:00 with Henry Winkler, but it's been really fun. Thank you for inviting me. It was great meeting you. It's good to see you. And it was a really interesting conversation. And I'm very grateful to be part of it and that I could give my 2 cents and that anyone could listen to it. Thank you.
I love it. I want to take this time to thank Salvador, Ernesto, Leo, Laura, Mildred, and Don for joining the Latinx panel brought to you by the Diversity Committee of the Costume Designers Guild. We hope that this conversation has educated and inspired others, and we look forward to many more. Thank you guys so much. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye. Adios.